Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Every Second Counts podcast. Today is a special episode. This is the fourth episode of the podcast. However, I have my first guest on, and this guest is someone who helped me form the mindset I've had going through the training and everything I went through. And I feel having someone there that can help you, someone in your corner, someone motivating you actually can help you. So my first guest to the show is Chris Lewis. He's a national board certified health and wellness coach, and also was my coach for the Mission 22 um, recovery and resilience program. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Chris Lewis to the program.
Hello, Tom. Oh,
Chris,
yeah,
how are you?
doing well, man. Thanks so much for that cool introduction. I was kind of expecting I was hoping for some Beastie Boys music there, but I think the hard rock will suffice for me.
Hey, that's the best thing I could find for free. So
Oh,
that's how we rocking with it.
you got that? Yeah, some of that makes sense. Yeah.
So I thank you for being the first guest and coming on. The biggest part I feel is our relationship started in July to catch some people up that are listening. I was a ambassador for Mission 22, and to find out more about the program, I decided to become a participant in the recovery and resilience program, and that's where I met you. To where we were able to actually sit down and I thought, to be honest, and you might, I'll ask you some questions to maybe you've seen it before, but I felt I had something already engraved. My plan was good and where I was going was good. Like I felt like I didn't need the program, but I'm gonna try it out. See how other people could fit into it. And then when it comes down to it, it actually helped me a lot. How do you feel when I entered the program, my attitude from the beginning and then till the end?
Yeah, it's interesting because you came in having prior experience as a coach with 75 Hard, which I was familiar with as well. I've never coached with them or anything, but it's just a different approach. Someone that maybe doesn't have that background may need a little more help and more focus on diet, lifestyle, exercise. But I would say from the jump, it was very apparent that you kind of already knew um, what it took to get in shape, what healthy food looked like, what discipline looked like in terms of getting to the gym every day. Um,
Hmm.
so from that perspective, it was kind of interesting. I mean, I think sometimes you can get intimidated by that, like, oh, they're already a coach, they already know everything. But what you quickly find out is you listen to someone's story, like I listened to yours, you quickly realize that,
It's
you
something
know,
in their mind. It's
well,
a it's
it's
a,
just
it's a
that,
false narrative per se.
well, not necessarily. You just figure out like, what do you need? That's
Okay.
really my approach. Like, what does Tom need? Because I don't think he needs me to figure out an exercise program for him. I don't think he
Okay.
really needs me to talk a lot about diet and the importance of exercise. But what does Tom need? And so
Hmm.
what it really became was, okay, I sensed that there was an opportunity to talk about sort of relationships, and that's actually not too uncommon in terms of my work with Mission 22. I find a lot of guys that I work with, that's a heavy focus is relationships.
Do you feel it's more relationship maybe with yourself or with family, children, your own community?
That's a really good question, actually. I think relationship with others is is a big deal. I mean, it sounds like it seems to me anyway that a lot of times marriages are sort of on the rocks, or
Hmm.
relationships with children are um, sort of a tough spot. Um,
Absolutely.
but I do think there's a lot of self judgment going on there too. And so a lot of that was going on. I sense just from our work together was like just this constant, like, I'm not enough. Um, People around me need more from me. But you're just constantly just in your own head. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I see that a lot actually. A lot of guys spending a lot of time in their own head.
So for people listening that don't know, Chris is a coach outside of just Mission 22, and he helps a lot of people with different aspects of their life. And to get down to it, what is a national board certified health and wellness coach? Like
Well, it
what
can
is
mean a
so
lot of.
like when you break it down, what could like yeah, I worked with First Form, I was a coach, I was certified through ISSA, but you know, obviously I didn't have all the titles after like you would.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So what is the difference in, well, basically what is that? That a national board certified health and wellness, coach.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the coaching industry is actually pretty unregulated.
Mhm.
You've seen a lot of coaches. First of all, I'm not dogging any other coach, but it's like pretty much anyone can say they're a coach.
Mhm.
And because it's kind of like, it's not like doctor or nurse. Nobody can just walk around and say I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse. You have to earn those regulations. There's tests. So the NBHW, what am I? NBC-HWC. So it's a board that said, hey, if you're gonna be if you're gonna have these credentials, you gotta understand these core competence. They're called competencies. So basically, you
Mhm.
just gotta understand some basic things about how a coaching relationship works. Um, and there's continuing education, like there would be in any regulated field, like nursing. Like my wife is a nurse, and so
Mhm.
she can't just take one test and then be done forever. She's got to continue to learn about a variety of topics. And so I have those same types of requirements, though probably on a like I wouldn't say I'm on the same level by any means as like a nurse or anything like that. But the point is that it's regulated.
Absolutely. And I think you're 100% saying that nowadays it's common to
Yeah.
everyone just to throw that title on saying I'm a coach because I could tell other people to do something. I give advice per se, advice not sanctioned advice per se, as
Yeah.
far as
Which
like regulated, maybe instead of theory, like you're more knowledgeable instead of if someone disclaiming they're a coach, they could say, it's from their own experience or whatever, but there's a lot like you said, there's a lot of levels to just that title.
Yeah, what's funny about like I think when people think of coaching, or not a lot of times even people that get into coaching, they kind of think I know some things and I'm here to tell the world all the things that I know. But as you get into coaching, you kind of realize like, you know, it's really more, it's just focus on the person that you're working with, focus on the person that's in front of you. Because what I found, I mean, just when I was early on in my coaching career, one of the first clients I worked with, not with Mission 22, but
Hmm.
she was kind of really inquisitive of me and just really skeptical of me, which honestly, I kind of like it. I kind of like it when people are skeptical of me because they think like, oh, I'm here to tell them all the things that they have to do and I'm going to, do all the, I'm going to, crack the whip. But she was very, very skeptical. And she was like, so what is your story? And then I kind of say, okay, like I start to tell her like who I am, what I do. And it was
Hmm.
like in a like a half a second, it was more about like her own story. So the
Absolutely.
point is that people aren't really like they're not really that interested in you, or or in me as a coach. Like they're just not that interested.
Yeah, I think that the need has become something as of late. I think maybe with coronavirus, the need of wanting a coach or the need of wanting someone or get mentally and physically fit over the past couple of years, I think has gotten higher, and people are being able to go to school and everyone's easy. I mean, I did it myself. It's easy to become a coach, but being able to focus on, like you said, the person and what they need, how do you feel that that helps you as a coach?
Ooh, there's a couple pieces of that question. I'm trying to figure out if
Right,
I followed
right.
all
Break.
that.
You could break that down because
um,
the reason I ask is when you have to do it as a coach. I know when I was doing with coaching and you're dealing with people, I'm doing like protein and creatine and cardio, very simplistic micro kind of things. But you're dealing with people's emotions and feelings as well as everyone else. But that has to you can't take your work home, but that has to bleed over dealing with people at some point as a coach. Do you
yeah.
think that that's some kind of impact?
Well, let's just back up a little bit. So let's go back to
Okay.
coronavirus and like the impact and the mental health. First of all, yeah, I do think the response to COVID definitely caused some mental angst, and I think people really need connection. And I think what COVID like the whole thing, what it revealed is that like people need people. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so one of the things I've seen a lot, and not just with my work with Mission 22, is that people sometimes think that healing happens in isolation, and it's like no. That is actually the because so like one of the things I've actually heard from like a younger person I work with is that well when I get my health in order, then I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna be social again with my friends, and it's like that's not a good move. Um,
Hmm.
I don't say it like that, but I would just say like humans need other humans in their life, and that is really how healing can happen.
Absolutely.
Any kind of healing. It's not just like um, whatever however you define healing, I guess. But the point is like the importance of community is incredibly important. And I think it was sort of you kind of realize that like oh shoot we left all the kids at home for X amount of time and now we have a flood of mental health issues. Well, what's going on there?
Hmm.
There's a trade-off, and nobody really wanted to talk about that. It was just about like doing the one thing, and then it's like, well, there are ramifications for this, and by the way, we don't really know what these ramifications are.
Absolutely. And not only is it just maybe keeping the kids at home in isolation, it's the adults that had to deal with it, the parents, especially if you're struggling with some kind of mental health yourself. And then now you're surrounded. I know just the thought of just being maybe trapped. I was in a different situation, but if you're trapped within your own mind and you're trapped at home with an advanced kind of measure of cabin fever, and now you have to you're used to your schedule and how you run your house, and now everything's just ambushed for years, and then you have to constantly, as a parent, or I feel you have to sacrifice some of yourself and your own mental, cognitive thought process maybe because you have to take care of others.
Yeah, I mean that's the definition of parenting, right?
Yep.
You're giving a little piece of yourself, and you have to. It's yeah. I think what you defined there was parenting.
And I think so besides that and going over, the reason for it, what got you into thinking going into the wellness or the health profession? What started you in this direction?
Yeah, so it's you know, so in 2016, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes,
Mhm.
and he's 4 years old. So for those that don't know what that diagnosis is or what that's like, so type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, and it basically destroys your insulin producing beta cells. It's a fancy word for saying basically everyone's body produces insulin, but when your own body destroys that, you no longer can produce insulin. And if you can no longer produce insulin, you can no longer control your blood sugar.
Mhm.
So his and dangerously, so blood sugar levels can become dangerously high, and when that happens, all kinds of complications can. And I won't go into all the details of what can go wrong there,
Hmm.
but um, type 1 diabetes is like a lifelong sentence. It's like
Uh,
this was just handed to you, and by the way, you're 4 years old, and for me, what it felt
what?
like was it felt like life just punched me right in the face. It is really
Absolutely.
my best way to describe it, because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know a lot about food. I didn't know a lot about diet, exercise. I wasn't like a wellness guy. I mean, I think at the time I went to elliptical and did the little stupid. By the
Hmm.
way, sidetrack. I think ellipticals are insanely dumb and and the most like worthless exercise ever. But that was about the extent of my wellness sort of journey. But so he had the diagnosis in June, and he's like a new 4 year old. It's not like a late. He's like a brand new 4 year old. June of 2016, he was diagnosed, and then November of that year, so just a few short months later, he got diagnosed with his second autoimmune disease, and it was
Oh, wow.
Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is basically an autoimmune condition to your thyroid. For those that don't know a lot about thyroid conditions, basically it just controls everything in your body, like your mood, your hair, your weight. The list goes on and on as far as
Hmm.
like how much this goes into this. And so I I was insanely frustrated with the treatment plan with this. I just got really curious. Is basically what it came down to. When he got diagnosed with type 1, I was like, what is this? How do you cure it? Come to find out, hey, newsflash, there is no cure. That's fun.
Absolutely.
But I just got insanely curious. And then when he got his second diagnosis, I got really mad, really angry. And it's
Absolutely.
like, okay. And then I started thinking, like, okay, so huge diagnosis here. A few months later, another thing. It's like, what's behind the corner over there? Because
Hmm.
I don't like where this is going. And the short of it is, like, they didn't, with the diet stuff, they just said basically count your carbs with the type 1 diabetes and, do your little insulin thing. That doesn't work.
Not
The
much of a
doc,
path, not much of an instruction.
no, the doctors think that works. It doesn't work,
Hmm.
because there's so many things that go into controlling blood sugar and controlling carbohydrates and all these different things. So I basically realized, like, oh, I can't feed my kid breakfast cereal anymore because this is insane. His blood sugar would. So for those that don't know, healthy blood sugar levels are between like 80 and 100. You feed this kid breakfast cereal, his blood sugar spikes to 400.
Oh, wow.
That's not good. Just know that. So that's what sparked the journey into just health and wellness coaching.
So that's a
Long-winded answer, by
lot.
the way.
No, no, that's a
Long-winded.
that was a great answer because I think a lot of people, if you're dealing with anything, especially as a parent, not only frustration, but especially dealing with someone at 4 years old and they have a billion questions and they don't really know what's going on, and now their life has significantly changed and so did yours, but it's hard to become just self-focused because you're dealing with how can I keep him alive? What do I have to do? And hearing it from the doctors, it's like there's no way you're wrong. There has to be a sense of doubt every time you hear something like there's no way. We put people on the moon. There's no way you can tell me we can't heal something, and it has to become how does that balance start as far as you wanting to find out more to become a coach as well as being able to accept it as a parent that this is going to be trying, for a long time.
Yeah, so one of the things you said there was like the kid had a lot of questions. I don't know that he had a lot of questions. I think it was more just like you saw the hurt in his eyes and it just like
Mhm.
the confusion, like, why am I getting a shot here? So
Mhm.
by the way, if you're newly diagnosed with type 1, you're gonna get a needle shoved in your arm so you can eat whatever garbage food they're feeding you at the hospital. And make no mistake, the food at the hospital is garbage.
Mhm.
Um, so they're going to give you shots in the arm, and your kid's going to cry, and it's going to be like it's insanely um, sad and difficult and to understand. Um, so I guess I'll say this: like my wife was a rock star. She was and is a rock star. So she
Mhm.
is a nurse. So this wasn't totally foreign to her. The whole idea of like drawing up insulin, giving it, put it in someone's arm. So she really did a lot of the day to day stuff. I really got obsessed with just like how do I fix this? Because I'm really of the mindset like there's an answer for everything.
Absolutely.
I really don't feel like there's not a lot of things in life that there's not answers for. But for this, so I was just searching. I'd be up on the internet just asking questions like, okay, who's managing this? Who's reversing this? Who's because there is a better way to manage type 1 diabetes and any I would say there is a correct and a beneficial way to manage chronic disease. And there's definitely ways that don't work. The ways that doesn't work is a standard American diet. That
Mhm.
stuff is garbage. That doesn't work.
Okay.
So my background is in ancestral health. That's why I went to school. So I would say the answers to managing chronic disease and coming a very long way and improving your state of health is following a primal or paleo style diet.
Mhm. And
That's
you go ahead.
so that's essentially what I discovered and what I decided to pursue and become educated in. Now, I don't want to just say like, hey, it's the only answer, nothing else works. I'm not. I know people have their biases, and I'm not here to argue with anybody. Like whatever your, I've had plenty of coaching clients,
Mhm.
not by choice. I've worked for other companies that they're vegans and stuff, and we have our differences and whatever. And it's like I'm not here to argue with folks and say like your diet's wrong and here's all the thousands of reasons why. Because I find with vegan diets and things like that, like there's always more to the story than just I think it's the healthiest diet. There's
Uh,
always way more to that story.
so going into coaching and learning different about the different ways of eating, dealing with your son, how does it feel talking to someone, maybe say a veteran right off the beginning and say, how does that feel either way? Because
Well,
you've been on the receiving end of bad news and I'll be honest, any kind of situation where it deals with your family or your children, it's a traumatic situation and it's a daily situation every day that you have to deal with. So I feel how does it feel being able to deal with your own personal stuff as well as talking with veterans and things of that?
I mean, I think I don't think I sit and dwell on it a lot. I think one of the things if you talk with type 1 parents, and then by the way, for all the type 1 parents out there, hats off, you guys are all doing just phenomenal work, and the assignment you've been given to help your family and your children, it's incredible, and I just have the most respect for those families, and because I know what they go through. But I would say,
Mhm.
for me, we don't. It's a daily thing because you never really. Because here's the question you get a lot. Well, how's your son's diabetes? Is his sugar normal now? Is it stabilized? You get that a lot.
Mhm.
Newsflash, doesn't ever it doesn't ever get like to the point of where like you're no longer concerned about it because there's so many things that play into it besides diet. It can be
Mhm.
if he's sick, now his blood sugar is going up. If he has a bad dream, his blood sugar will go through the roof in the
Mhm.
middle of the night. And so things never ever really get like, oh yeah, I've got to figure it out. It's good now. So if you ever meet someone with type 1 or have a child with type 1, a great question is not, hey, are things better now?
Yeah,
It's better.
there's
Yeah.
no remission. There's no like we're out of the bed, we're out of the dark.
Yeah.
Things are doing well now. We'll just have to monitor it and see how things are going.
I mean, there's definitely, I'm thankful for where I'm at today and how I
Mhm.
understand how foods impact on blood sugar. And so I think there is a definitely a better place people can start. But as far as like I have arrived. I got everything figured out and nothing's a problem for me. I don't know that that happens, to be totally honest. But as far as like, so I don't, but here's the thing, I don't find myself thinking about it all the time. Like when I'm in front of a veteran and stuff, it's like, it's my story is irrelevant. I'm not, I don't even think you even knew about my son or anything
No,
before
I
today.
didn't.
Yeah. So it's like, it's what led me to coaching, but it's not what has like, to be totally honest, I've never worked with a type 1 diabetic.
I
Even
think
though,
I
what's
Go
that?
ahead. Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful that you said that because as a coach, or it's so easy to pull from your own bag to say, to make it well, so we're the same. Like, I've struggled myself. It's so easy to do that. So when you go and you just have to worry about the veteran or the person you're talking to, that has to be extremely exhausting because you're on pause for that time. All your
See, I don't think
emotions and everything.
See, I
That's
don't think
how
so.
that's how
Okay.
well, go ahead. How do you
No,
see it?
I don't feel like it's draining for me at all, to be honest. I mean, you ever heard the saying,
Mhm.
like, do something you love and you never work a day in your life? I mean,
Mhm.
to be honest, I sort of feel like I'm living that right now. I love working with people. I love learning their stories. And the truth is, like, where did I hear this from? But it's like, we all have a certain leaning, wherever, like, what do we tend, like, I've always sort of been like a decent listener. I like to listen to
Mhm.
people. What I can talk. Clearly, I can talk. But it's
Mhm.
like I do enjoy listening. I like asking questions, but there's a skill to it too. So like I've learned to develop that skill, and okay, how do you when do you follow up on a question, or maybe dig a little bit more here. Like there's a little term called little nuggets. Like sometimes when people talk, they're dropping little nuggets. It's like, oh, there's a little nugget there, and you just pick on it, and then you go deeper into that sort of thing. So I genuinely, every veteran I've worked with, I have thoroughly enjoyed, and I've just come to like really love them. To be honest, I think
Mhm.
they're a special group. I think they have so much to offer, and so it's kind of like, what's it like? I don't know how. It's kind of like I don't know how I got right here to doing what I'm doing, but I'm really really grateful that I get to do it, and I'm just really honored, to be
Mhm.
totally honest, is that it just feels like such a privilege to do the work that I do.
So let's expound on that. How do you feel? Uh, a, do you feel there's been a heightened with veteran mental health acceptance or things of that nature in the past couple of years?
For me,
Working with veterans. So when you talk to them, excluding our conversations, but like when you initially have to talk with veterans, where do you feel the biggest starting point can be? Is it the foundation, let's call it? Where do you need to begin? If someone's listening and they're dealing with something, where do you feel they need to begin just to start off? Because me, I was an ambassador. I wanted to me, it was let me find out more about what I'm talking about, but it turned into something completely different that I wasn't even prepared for. You
right.
know what I mean? So, what do you feel the starting point could be for some of the veterans that are out there?
I think talking to someone,
Hmm.
maybe not just because here's the thing. Here's what I hear a lot. I went to the VA. I talked to the counselor or whatever. For whatever reason, there's a disconnect there, and I think it comes back to Shauna Springer's Warrior book, where it's just like there's just not that connection where they feel like they're in like a good place. And I think an organization like Mission 22 has a strong track record of connecting with veterans and doing really solid work, and you feel like their heart is in the right place. And so I think when people when I'm introduced to them, there's just immediately sort of like a respect or a level of trust. I think maybe that's what it is. Maybe not respect, but it's a level of trust almost initially
Mhm.
versus in some of the other organizations I've been part of and I've worked with, like they're kind of skeptical of me. I really don't get people within Mission 22 that are skeptical of me. And again, like
Mhm.
part of me kind of likes it when people are skeptical of me because I think it's kind of funny. Just I'm kind of quirky, I kind of I like to have fun. For people that know me, like I like to have a good time, and so I kind of like it when people are sort of like they want to test me or they want to Mission 22 people I've really not had a lot of people that sort of screw with me like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's fine. But I would just say I forget where I was going with that, but
How kind of like how you like being tested. And I think that that's huge because that makes you dig harder, work a little harder for proof, for source, and for that trust.
yeah, I mean, well, maybe something. I think it was like your question was though. It was like, where do you start with someone? And so I
Mhm.
think what it is really is just like being able to talk with somebody. And I think when someone is able to talk and communicate, like what is going on? Because here's the thing, what I find, and this is you confirm this, but I think
Mhm.
even when you start coming to me, you start talking to me, you start talking to me about stuff that maybe you're not even talking to your spouse about.
Mhm.
Am I right?
Yeah. I agree with that because you're picking things when talking to someone. It's something I feel you're not comfortable telling anybody, but if I'm gonna
Yeah,
tell anyone, I'm gonna tell you. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's not
yeah.
because there's no judgment there, like, you feel that immediate sense of trust and, "Hey, I'm talking to you, guess what? You're gonna have to hear all my stuff." So do you think there's a disconnect? I mean, you stated there was, but do you feel the disconnect with the VA and veterans is it's a continuation of being in the government or serving, and now it's just it's just an extension. Like I served in the military for however long, 4 years, 20 years, 30 years, and now I have to deal now I'm back. Now I'm dealing with the government and it's just a still uneasy sense to where Mission 22, it's only for me. There's nothing there for me. And it's exclusive, I feel, because the VA is for all veterans and there's a lot and they all need different kind of treatments and it's not that one-on-one connection because going to the VA, I've dealt with different doctors. Every time you go, you might see a different specialist or a different
Sure.
person. You feel when you have that, say that 20 mission 22 or that counseling or that being able to communicate that gives you that freedom. I think that to just express exactly how you feel where you won't feel comfortable actually telling someone else something.
Yeah, I think you have a much better understanding of this than I do actually. I really don't have a great insight into the VA, or I've never interacted with someone at the VA. I don't really
Mhm.
know. I only know what people, veterans like like yourself, have told me about the VA, and so that's just my sense from it. So I actually think you have a better insight and more unique thing to share about the VA and like why there's that disconnect. I can't really speak to it, to be honest, other than to say I know what I have with Mission 22.
Mhm.
Um, I don't really know what I have with like what you guys have with the VA. So maybe you could
How
elaborate on that a little bit. Like, why do you think there's a disconnect between veterans and the VA?
I think it's an ego thing to start off with because it's a me thing. I did this. I served. I've been catered to for however long I was in the military. I go to medical if I have a reason to go. Now maybe there's some other circumstances. Now I have to go to the VA. Right off the bat, the VA locations are too sporadic. I feel the VA is two locations by me or at least 2 hours apart.
Mm.
So that's a lot. I mean, just for myself, if I gotta drive in a car for 2 hours, the wheels are turning. I feel that's way too much time when you have someone that's dealing with any kind of trauma or dealing with anything, when they have to drive long distances, that's a lot of time for the mind to play tricks and a lot of information to flow. So I think that's a hard part. And like I said, that's the catch-all. The VA is the catch-all. All veterans free healthcare when you get out. You have to go through this process. You go to the VA, just like medical. No one in any branch goes, the medical is great in the military. You know what I mean? No one screams it. And now it's like, well, I have to go to packed facilities. a lot of the facilities are old throughout the country, and I just don't feel there's enough offices, enough people to actually, deal with the amount of veterans, not just ones, when you go to the VA, you see all the veterans from the Vietnam War. You see all the veterans that have been in that served 50 years or more ago, and then you add, the last 20 years of people. That's a lot of people in the military, especially all the conflict we had. It's a lot of situations that need touching and people around. And I think it's not enough tight grasp. Like you're going through the Mission 22 program. I feel it's a set program and there's legitimacy or behind it. There's an actual syllabus kind of, if you will, to go over to where you go to the VA, whatever you talk to with your doctor, and then you're back on your own, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Sure.
There's those not that checking in, there's not that, you know, this is what I'm saying, because I know a lot of the talks we had, I think the most powerful part was I could talk for 10 minutes and then you would just bring it home with the you could see what I was painting, but you would just bring it in and make it more sensible to me as you said it back to me.
All right. And I think so. A couple of things there. So first of all, there's not that many. You talk about like going to see someone at a facility and then just sort of like, well, I'll see you in 3 months or 6 months, probably
Mhm.
6 months to a year. That's very similar to like conventional type medicine,
Absolutely.
right? And so that's why when you get, well, similar to get a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, all right, good luck. See you in a bit. You can call this number. I mean, there was a number that we could call and stuff frequently because I mean, but the point is like people, do well with some accountability and some kind of like, okay, here's sort of where we're going. Even though like, okay, so Mission 22, it definitely has, the outline, so to speak. But like between you and I, it was like very much, hey man, what are you dealing with? And I know like one of the things I remember you saying is that like through our conversations, we kind of brought life to sort of like where like the stuff you were working through. And I thought that was pretty cool to hear. But it's I actually think it's somewhat set, but it really is focused on like, hey man, where are you at? Because
Mhm.
like I was saying earlier, I'm not gonna say I'm not for a former first form coach. I'm not gonna say, hey man, let's focus on your nutrition. It's like
Mhm.
it became very clear to me like you already knew that stuff, and so I'm not gonna waste your time on stuff you already know. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to see the parallels between like maybe the relationship with the patient and the VA, and then
Mhm.
and just like the modern medicine in general. But I want to touch on something and just like sort of how disconnected they are. You said like these VAs are packed,
Mhm.
right? A common thing I hear from, I would say, probably every veteran. What do they where do they hate being the most?
Sitting around.
Well, crowded areas.
Oh, absolutely.
Crowded areas. Crowds are almost
Mhm.
always it's a trigger for anxiety. It's a trigger for just all kinds of anxious thoughts. And so if you're having a VA where there's clearly not enough of them to serve the patient needs. I mean, now you're dealing with crowds, and so even like veteran owned businesses
Mhm.
or veteran or I shouldn't say that. I would say not veteran owned businesses, but I would say like companies that claim like, okay, we hire veterans or we're here for veterans, like they're not aware of like basic stuff like, hey, maybe don't have crowded say like rooms where we're all in there together. You know,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? Like there just seems to be a bit of a disconnect there where it's like, okay, I want to do something for veterans, but I don't know the basics of like veterans, what really bugs them
Mhm.
or what can bug them. I'm not trying to box everyone, like everyone's the same. It's not like that, but there's definitely some common threads where it's like, yeah, this just doesn't seem like a wise thing to do.
So that you don't feel, and I agree with you. I think there's enough data out there to say, you know what, how we're treating the veterans, maybe doesn't make them the most comfortable to want to do treatment. You know what I mean? Like right off the beginning, if you're trying to get treatment or like you said, trying to get a job after you got out of the military and your mind still you're transitioning constantly, you're dealing with things and they put you in a position to where you're just not mentally there yet. And I've had situations personally myself to where I think about something if I'm going to go for a drive somewhere or and so many things pop out about time, locations, and the anxiety and things like that just start coming up. So I can imagine knowing if I'm going to go to work at a place like that or I have an appointment at the VA, it's like, well, snap. Like I already know the uncomfortable feeling, and then they're going to make me wear a mask. Let's say that that usually sets me off just right there, just because it makes me so uncomfortable not being able to talk to the doctor. I mean, I've had some cool VA doctors where my own personal one at the clinic where I say, I'm not wearing my mask. Once I go in the office and they know it, they take
Yeah.
their mask off, if they want, because it's like, I'm not a human anymore. Like now I'm here to tell you all my issues and I'm wearing a mask and I can't breathe. And this is making me extremely uncomfortable.
I can't say that's strictly like a veteran thing. I think that's basically at this point. I don't know what we're I know we're mental health is sort of like a something we're focusing on here, but I feel like you see when you see certain things and going on, and just like I don't know the way back from like I'm thinking about like the person that's in the mask by
Yeah.
themselves in a car. It's like that's like a whole nother thing. Like I don't know
Like
what. Like I'm
when
really
are
curious. I'm really curious. I'm really curious, but I don't know like where do you go from there? But
no,
anyway, that little sidetrack when you talk about the mask and stuff. I think the mask at this point is just like I don't know what it is, but it's not like I don't know what it is basically.
I think it's a reminder of trauma to begin with. Like, I think that was for some. I know me personally, I didn't have to deal with it as much as, normal people because I was transitioning out of the military. I was home more, so I wasn't out and about. And then then we moved, and I wasn't in the vicinity to be around a lot of people. But
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine being at a job for 8 hours wearing a mask the whole time
Yeah.
for years. Like it's to me, it just feels very taxing and very, very, non-rewarding because it's like a punishment. To me, it always felt like a punishment to have to do something like that.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those things that it's there seems to be some other
Other
I don't
force.
want to call it agenda because then I'll get my tinfoil hat on and go down the conspiracy road. But it's like I don't know what we're doing here, like to some
Mhm.
degree. But yeah, no, I know you live out in the wilderness, so you're honestly those guys. The Amish had it figured out. I tell you what, the Amish during all the COVID, man, those guys are like, yeah, we're good. We
Mhm.
are good. So I know you're kind of living a lifestyle, not exactly the same, but you're you're out by a lot of folks.
Yeah, when I moved here, it wasn't that big of a deal, the mask thing.
Sure.
Like, not a lot of locals would be wearing it. But you made up a good point before. You talked about conversation, communication with other people for
Yeah.
veterans. Do you see a difference in therapy and counseling? Do you see a difference in those 2 terms?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm neither one of those, so I really
Mhm,
can't speak to like what the differences are between them. But I've worked with a counselor, I suppose, and I would say there are some parallels to coaching and counseling. And I know you didn't ask about coaching, but yeah, to be honest, like counseling and therapy, I think therapy might deal a little more with the past, and I think past trauma can provide context. That's usually what I say when someone asks about like or when I think about like where do I work, I don't really work in people's past too much.
mhm.
It's like it happened, but it's sort of like okay, so now how do we grow from that? Like what is it provides context for where you are currently, but now we're going to focus on growth. And that's where, the veterans that are like really, I don't do well in closed spaces. I don't do well in large crowds. To me, there's an opportunity for growth there. Now, maybe they get to a point where they can do it. Maybe they don't. But is it possible? I think it is. Or at least find a way to at least to know what it is, because sometimes it's hard to communicate. What is it about this that I feel so uncomfortable? I mean, maybe you know it, but you're not communicating with anyone, and you're not really. It just gets frustrating when you're just in this space of like, I don't want to feel this way. I know feeling this way is not how I'm supposed to feel. So therefore, like, but I don't know how to communicate it to someone, or at least someone that understands. And this includes spouses. A lot of spouses, they don't know, or they don't, they try to understand and they're trying to, but they just don't know. But doesn't mean they can't though. That's the thing where I think when you can work together and say, okay, this is where I'm at today. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I love. Because a lot of times it's like, it becomes frustrating because a concert or a large outing may be something that means a lot to their spouse, but to the person, to the veteran that's still struggling with what's going, it's just hard to do. But they want to be there for their spouse. They want to make sure that they're investing in the relationship. But it's like, how do I do that and make sure they're valued?
Absolutely.
But still like understanding my own needs. And I think it gets confusing and frustrating. So I think some can find themselves frustrated with like, how do I move through this?
I think, but being a coach, you are considered a counselor. I would say that as a degree, because as far as you say, you don't work in the past. The reflection of the past is the future, and when we work together, it's maybe not the past, but it's the roots. The roots of initial trauma or issues, and it's maybe not what you got while you were serving, but it's roots that maybe happened in life prior to you deal with the situation, and then now you're dealing with a whole different story now because it combined it. Two traumas combined it. You, does that make sense? If you're dealing with
Totally.
like any kind of issue prior to.
Let me just back up. Like, there's definitely a difference between a counselor and a coach. Like, vastly different. I would say I can't really. I'm not even compare myself to a counselor or compare myself to a therapist. It's very, very different, and the qualifications are different, and all the things are. But could there be parallels? Absolutely. There are sort of parallels with this stuff, and but like as far as the traumas go, like I don't know, man. And I'll say this, like, not everyone wants to talk about traumas. And I've definitely gone a full, program with someone and never really gotten into it. In fact, I remember a guy, I like this guy a lot, but you just like, I'll never share anything with you about it. And it's like, okay, like, I respect that. And it's not like my job to say, tell me all your traumas and let's just work past them. It's like, if you want to talk about them and you feel like it's necessary to talk about them, then I want to talk about that with you and sort of help you to go. But it's kind of like with coaching in general, though, like I don't come into a call and say like, all right, I think we should change your breakfast this week because I saw what you ate and it looks kind of sucky. So here's what I think is bad. It doesn't work like that. And so I think if people want to talk about traumas, it can add context, like I was saying, it adds context to where they're currently at. But I've heard this from Tony Robbins too. I think it's like we don't live in our past, So it's like no one lives there. We live in the present, and we go towards the future. So how do we? So that's why I love the term growth. Just how do we grow from wherever you're at? And so the pace is going to be different for everyone. How much? Gosh, this is a weird analogy, but like how much sunlight does someone have? And I think some of things, like what makes something grow? Water, sunlight, but like in the context of something like growing from trauma, what are some analogies for sunlight and water? Well, it's community,
Mm-hmm.
it's relationships, healthy relationships, and I would say, exercise plays in it. I mean, when I'm talking about mental health, it's like it's hard to achieve mental health without physical health,
Mm-hmm.
because they play off of each other. They're not like
Absolutely.
this separate thing, So yeah, I guess maybe what I'm trying to say is like if you want to grow, you need the things like what promotes growth. So the sun, the water, and then that could be those analogies are into the community and the people and the healthy relationships and the exercise. Those are things that help people grow. And diet plays a role in there too. So what are you feeding? What kind of fertilizer are you using?
Mm-hmm. I think that was a great analogy.
I just came up with that right off the hook. I didn't know I was going to say that. I just kind of came to me. So that's kind of how
Hey,
my brain works. I just kind of like I'll start talking and it's like, oh, I think this is kind of like that, and I think that might actually work. So that's the first time I've
no,
ever said that.
no, write that down, man, because I think that analogy is perfect because you come from a usually if someone is reaching out for something, they're in a dark spot, they're in a shaded spot anywhere in life.
Sure.
They're the isolation, as you said earlier, people feel they could heal from it, and I was a victim of that, I guess you could say. I thought, I like being alone. I like being by myself, but I feel that's the worst place for people too, unless you can start unless you can get ahead of some things and start working some things out like what we did, and you start just trying things out and growing from new things that you're trying out that you're not used to, that you try to become more comfortable with. And I think that right there helps people because it's so basic.
Yeah, we like to overlook
Water.
we like to overlook the basics, don't we? You know what analogy
Uh,
I thought of too? The other thing it came up to me. I forget when I was using this, but someone was asking. I was like, we always want to assume like whatever we're dealing with is like super complex. I'm not saying that mental health is not complicated. Nothing like that. It's not. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes it's like the simple fix. Sometimes the simple things that can contribute to a healthy life and a healthy diet or whatever is so simple that we overlook it. It's like, well, that can't possibly work. But you know what it's like?
what's
It's
that?
like when you're having computer issues and you're like, this thing is doing some weird stuff right now. Like all the stuff is going on, like the weird screen. And then you call the IT person because the IT person's got all the answers. They're gonna know. They're gonna know that this situation is so complex and so weird. And what are they gonna tell you? They're gonna tell you the same thing. Edward, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Mhm.
It is so simple, but we overlook the simple things. I think when you think about like a healthy diet, a healthy, exercise regimen, being in community. Like these are simple things, but somehow they got, it's like I heard this someone talk about it. We've got cheap versions of everything. Like social media is a cheap
Mhm.
version of being in community. It's not the same. It's not the same as going out to coffee with your friend, chatting on Instagram Messenger or whatever or Facebook Messenger. It's not the same. So
Mm-mm.
there's so many cheap substitutions for things that I think we miss out on some really rich opportunities to connect with other people and to do some of the basics. And if you do those things really well, I think that can only help promote growth.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% spot on the fakeness of utilizing social media as far as companionship, as far as communication with someone else, because there's no end to it. You communicate with, but there's no feeling. You might get excited that you're maybe talking to someone you haven't talked to in a long time, or you're getting something, but there's no physical. You're not there. Like you said, if you're out and about, you're somewhere with someone, everything that goes on, the conversation, hand movements, facial expressions, everything feeds into that conversation. And when you're just messaging someone, you're not getting that satisfaction. I don't think you're gonna want or the aim that you're looking for.
Well, it's the richness. The richness is not going to be there. It's going to be a watered down version of. Well, we'll say this: it's like a plant based steak. It's
Hmm.
not the same. It's not the same, and it's not nearly as good. I don't care what you say.
Well, that makes that's it. That's a great analogy. I could put it in front of you, but I promise you it's different.
It smells different. It tastes different. It's just not the same.
I've been thinking for a little bit now that I feel there's a disconnect when people get out of the military and then they're released into the world. That now they have, requirements that they go and, they check in, they do their VA stuff, but then they're just there. And whatever the VA comes back with or their own, localized doctor, now they're civilian again. But there's no hands-on, there's nothing helping the veterans as soon as they get out, especially if they're dealing with any kind of trauma linked PTSD or, depression or anything. Do you feel that there should be something as well, like a box, let's say, like in somewhere between that transition between getting 100% out of the military and getting pushed in the civilian world, that there should be something maybe added in there before you just get rolled on out?
I mean, I think you would be a much better person to answer something like that as someone who's served and has you've gone through the transition. You're someone
Mhm.
who's been in there, and I know lots of other veterans can really speak to this much better than I think some veterans probably roll into their next career just fine. It's not all the same, and so
Mhm.
I don't know that I can say yeah there needs to be something totally different for or something very specific for every person coming out of the military. Should there be an option? Love for there to be the option. I'm a big fan of freedom. I'm a big fan
Mhm.
of people having choices, and I do think it's I've worked with a lot of people that just like there's not. Well, you're a good example. Like you rolled out of the military, you got into your first form coach, and so like that's like what you're doing now. That's what all encompassing, and I think that served you for a while. But it's sort of like where do you like what is the transition? What should the transition look like from the military to civilian life? I don't know that it's right. I don't know a defined answer for that.
I don't think there is, because I don't think there is no catch-all for it, because everyone comes from different places, different backgrounds, and you may have served and went back to your normal life and that's it. Some people ride the veteran train as long as they can. Some turn back to the military, contracting jobs, or like you said, they did their time and they move on. And I think what we miss out on is the people that just move on. We don't see anything from them till maybe years later. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big issue, because trauma, it's not, you're gonna feel like I retired over 2 years ago now, but that first year was easy because I wasn't at work no more. You know what I mean? It's a new experience. That first year, you're just out. It's like, oh, this is exciting. Like when you graduate high school, that summer's great until maybe you go into college or you start a new job and it's like, oh, this is gonna be it for a while now. There's no impact. You know what I mean? Once you get out and you just go straight into a job, I don't think there's no release. There's nothing to be able to give you any release of anything, because at that point, I think it would be silly to go back to the VA 2, 3 years later, or uncomfortable for the veteran, I would feel. Like for myself to come in 3 years, 4 years later and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with this now." I think it's hard to put that on there, because if I'm going to the VA, I'll right from the beginning, I'm like, no one believes me. They're not going to believe me. And I feel that's like you said, you said it more gracefully, but spouse, family, work colleagues, your community, people you deal with, they're never going to understand what you're dealing with or going through. So it's hard to balance everything all together and try to help. You know what I mean? Like if you have something going on, it's hard to communicate with other people and allow that out. And I
Well,
feel. Go ahead.
I think I didn't mean to say that like people could never understand. It's just more just like I think the feeling is that no one understands or no that nobody
Mhm.
could understand. I think that's more like what it was. I think a lot of spouses have the ability to sort of like all right, you'd be able to kind of speak with your relationship and how, they may not be able to understand fully, but they could maybe empathize and at least attempt to gain some kind of understanding of like where you're currently at and sort of like what you're processing. So I don't know that it's one of those things where nobody could ever possibly understand. It's more just like the feeling that no one understands, I think is what it is. And I don't really know why that is, to be honest.
Mhm.
So maybe I don't know if that's something you can elaborate on, or like what is it about someone that served and comes back, and then the feeling that these people don't get it, no one understands.
I think it's a lot of it is personal worth. You either feel, you did something, so you should be honored at some point, or there is nothing. There's no celebration. There is nothing, and you feel like you there was a lot of things maybe you lost or trauma you dealt with, and no one will ever understand it.
Sure.
I feel that it's hard to actually what going through the program and talking with you. I feel the biggest thing is the expression to other people on how you're doing all the time. Like, it's real easy to say, "How was your day?" And it's real quick, it was good. But what was about the day that made it good?
Right.
Those little things, I feel maybe not in that aspect, but those little things on why the day was great. But for a veteran, why was the day great? What made it good? What made it bad? What are you dealing with? And when you could express those little things to somebody, that could cause relief because you're actually being able to exhale, I think. Well, for myself, I was able dealing with things that maybe I was struggling with, I became more comfortable and more aware and wanting to change and wanting to seek
Yeah.
out different avenues because if you think the path is concreted in, once you're able to change it and you start going a different way, you'll start seeing a different change. And I think that's the difference I felt, being able to go through the program that I was able to feel different and experience different things. Then I could tell other people about it because I felt better. I felt empowered about it. You know what I mean? I think getting that empowerment of talking with somebody
Yeah.
and knowing that it's not just you or someone had a bad day. Well, I had a bad day. Well, tell me why. And you could just tell someone and be 100% honest. That's when I think you attain some kind of victory. Because when you could be honest with someone about what you're dealing with, that's full exposure right there, and I think when you could expose yourself for what you're going through or what's going on, that's when truth comes out, and that's when you might be able to feel a little more better about yourself once you're able to get what's holding you in, causing you to, hold your breath, tighten your chest, things like that, anything that's causing you any kind of issues, sleep, diet, exercise, lack of, all of them. Something has to, be in there to have that balance to be able to check it, and I feel being able to bounce back and forth off somebody,
Hmm.
being able to, I think dealing with the coach was probably the most powerful thing, I think, because it had that accountability. "Hey, last week we talked about this. How was this week? What did you do different?" Or you know what I mean? Or what did you read? Or what did you learn? I think when you have that course set in front of you, it allows you things to become structured and easier to follow because it's more self-paced and more self-reliant. I think that's where the power comes from because you're only going to grow if you want to. If you're able to, if certain strings were pulled, you're able to expose more of yourself at a time.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's power in, in our talks, it just like understanding this. Okay, what is going on? And then, so it's not just power in um, just getting that out, just communicate. Like, how does get this out? And then when you hear it, and
Mhm.
then someone has heard you, like you feel like, oh, this person heard me. Um, I don't know how many people are feeling heard right now, and I think when you do feel heard, I think there's some power in that, and then that can make you feel like, oh. yeah, I think this is what I'm struggling with. Or I met with a guy today, and just there's, he wants, they want to lose, wants to lose some weight, and so it's like, there's a mental game with that. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, eat better and do some exercise. It's like, how do you how do you view yourself? How do you view your capabilities? Like, what do you think you're capable of? Like, what do you think you're able to overcome? Do you have any evidence of overcoming things? Are there any other things in your life where um, you've had like significant amount of success, and are there parallels with that success and then the success that you desire that maybe you don't quite have yet? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the things a coach can do, is sort of like, hey, you see this over here? Like, you're doing really, really well here. Do you see how like you might utilize some of those same thinking patterns? Like, one of the analogies I used today was like, so if you believe that
Mm-hmm.
achieving a healthy body weight is difficult, um, do you think, how likely it is, do you think that you're going to achieve that? Versus if you believe that, like, what, I think it's possible for me. I think so. It's like that whole biology of belief thing. Like, there's a certain level of belief that is necessary. Like, do you believe you are capable of growing, or do you believe that you are capable of achieving something?
Absolutely.
There's some of that that's necessary. And I don't know where I was going with this, but I think what you're saying with like the power of communicating. It's yes, communicating what's on your mind and have someone hearing what you're saying, and also pointing out like, hey, here's some parallels here. Um, did you see that over there?
Absolutely. I think that was key, because it's able to point out key things that maybe you're not seeing, and someone else could point it out to you. Say, "Well, that's great. How'd that help you?" And it's little things to help. It's more rungs on the ladder to keep climbing when
Mhm.
someone else could help you and put you there. Um, how do you feel the state of veterans are now compared to when you first started dealing with them?
That's really hard for me to answer, man. I really do not have the answer.
I have a better question. I do have a
Okay,
better question.
okay, okay.
Someone directly out of the military by someone that's been out a little longer. Is there maturity? Is there something different you feel when dealing with a veteran that's been out a little longer? Or, you know what I mean? Because you have different times someone could have spent in, different deployments maybe they did, but if someone just got out months ago by someone that got out 5 years ago, you know what I mean? Do you think there's a difference?
I would imagine there's a difference, but I really can't. I don't know if I could tell you. I don't know if I could speak to it to say, here's the difference between the two, because I think the journeys are going to be they're going to be different for both of them. And then
Mhm.
I would say that, um, as I mentioned earlier, like, I've worked with some veterans that seemingly like just went right into civilian world and are thriving like right away. It's like that.
Mhm.
It's like, here's all my talents and skills I learned from the military, and then boom, boom, repackage them, and boom, they're off and doing really, really well in whatever field they've gone in. And then others are still, they're having lots of relationship issues, whether it be their boss or their work colleagues or the work environment, or and it doesn't necessarily mean that like one of them is better than the other, but it could be like, how are they processing trauma? Like, what, I think it's different for everybody, and I think it there's just so much involved that I don't know that you could say like, oh, veterans that are fresh out. It may come back to your point where, like, do you think there should be an off ramp into, something like an off ramp? I think an off ramp does kind of make sense. I think that would be like, I mean, to me, it makes sense, but
Mhm.
keeping in mind that I'm not someone who's had experiences like transitioning from the military to civilian life, and so,
Absolutely.
but to me it makes it, because just in like some of the books I've read and some of the trainings I've had, like, I think the Sebastian Junger's Tribe is a pretty fascinating book in terms of like describing just the intensity that veterans can feel, or the combat veterans specifically, and
Mhm.
then when they come back to civilian life, it's just like a much duller version of what they've been exposed to or what they've experienced. So that's my only real like like, yeah, it seemed like there could be a transition period there that could make some sense. And by and large, I mean, I think what Mission 22 is doing, I think it can be applicable in so many different ways. To be honest, I think it can serve as that. I think it can, just helping people become ultimately more resilient, for lack of a better word for it.
Absolutely.
And I see that so much, to be honest. Like I've had conversations with people where they're like, I think this right here. So we talked about, hey, what do you think could like really throw things off for you?
Hmm.
And they'll say like this right here. That if that goes off, I think I could be done. And done in terms of just like all my progress, all my hard work, just really just struggling. And then it's
Absolutely.
like, and then oddly enough, that thing happens, and then it's like all the, what do I want to try to say? What's that? All the Jenga
Correct.
blocks. All the Jenga blocks are still there. Like you pulled out something that it seems like if you pull that out, the whole thing comes crashing down, and you go into a tailspin of just all negativity. But it's like you pull that spot, and like the Jenga deal is still upright, and things are still. So that's been one of the coolest things that I've personally experienced just working with um, a lot of the veterans. Is just like seeing. I mean, the program's called Recovery and Resiliency,
Hmm.
and you literally see the resiliency that is found in these guys and gals. And I've actually not worked with a female yet. Someday I'm sure I will. I've worked with plenty of females in other contexts, but no veteran females. But I'm very confident, very sure that they have remarkable stories and remarkable levels of resiliency as well.
Absolutely. Well, we've been pushing hard for over an hour,
Yeah,
and
man.
before I let you go, I wanted to know what are a couple things you have for anyone that's listening, maybe veteran or not, that if they're dealing with any kind of thing, what are steps you feel that someone could do to start them in the right direction in their life to to start rebuilding a new foundation?
I mean, don't underestimate the power of community. Get yourself in community. I think a lot of it comes down to that. I
Hmm.
don't think there's a shortage of veteran groups and that are out there that really. I've heard of so many different ones. I don't even know. To be honest, I don't know all the ones that exist. Like I feel like
There's
I
too
still.
many.
I feel like I'm still kind of like a novice when it comes to like what all is available for veterans that serve. But it's a beautiful thing, and I think being involved in those does seem to help to some degree. I still think what's tough about those things, they all seem to be like one-off type things, and it seems like nothing seems to latch on, and I don't know why that is, but that's a common thread I've heard as well. So like, yeah, I go to all these different veteran things, but nothing seems to like, oh, I got it now. I'm hooked into community. So I still think it comes down to being connected into a local community,
Hmm.
a gym of some kind where you're around other people that have similar values and are trying to accomplish something difficult. And when I say difficult, like I really resonate with Michael Easter, author of The Comfort Crisis, one of my favorite books ever. Is just a phenomenal story of, I don't know, it's just a phenomenal book, and it's just like it just shows the power of doing difficult things
Hmm.
regularly, doing difficult things regularly, physical things. I think probably most notably, but doing hard workouts. Joe Rogan talks a lot about that, doing hard workouts. He basically just killed himself in the gym regularly. I think there's something kind of to that. I think humans are meant to work hard. I think your question was something like I think, yeah, your question was like what should they do? And I think community. Don't underestimate the power of community. And I know that's tough because a lot of them, a lot of not, I hate to say, just a lot of veterans struggle, but I think they can struggle to find like community sometimes.
No, that's true because the only community you have is maybe people you served with, and then it's hard to find that because you worked with them for so long, you did so much with them, people you worked with. When you get out, it's hard to have that connection with other people
Yeah.
that didn't that aren't with you, don't have your experience, and you didn't go through anything with them, so it's harder to develop that relationship.
And to that point, guys, how do guys connect? Guys connect through physicality, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
not just like, hey man, let's go out for coffee sometime. Like I've had like newer guy friends say, hey man, do you want to catch coffee sometime? I'm like, not really. Uh, do you want to come play basketball with me? Do you want to come play softball with me? Perfect. That's how I generally connect with other dudes. If I'm gonna be like a friend with them, I generally don't do it over like, yeah, I want to get to know you with coffee. But I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying, generally speaking, guys do well with the physical element of things. And but I would say, just to be mindful of, like, people, a lot of veterans are dealing with various injuries. So whatever difficult looks like for you, I would say pursue some difficult challenges, because ultimately overcoming those difficult things, it can be mental. They can be cold showers for whatever. I mean, there's power in overcoming difficult things, and
Absolutely.
that's going to build resiliency as well. So,
But I appreciate it. Everyone listening, this has been Chris Lewis, and this is the Every Second Counts podcast.
cool, man.